Hello, Neil Wilding here. I want to welcome everyone to another edition of our Stonewood Study Group. I have to say, this forum has been around for as long as we've had membership. And when I first started this, I'd have 5, 10 of our members join us. And now this platform has grown to where we're expecting a couple of hundred people on this today. So it's an honor to me that so many of you choose to allocate, half an hour of your day, which I know is busy meeting with clients, to kind of learn a little bit. And many times I learn just as much as many of you do. So today we're going to really get in the weeds a little bit. We're going to dive deep into Roth conversions. We've been talking about converting tax deferred money to tax free for years, right? It's a foundation to the membership that we put forward, which is to give you the tools and the messaging to execute conversions and helping your clients save hundreds of thousands of dollars on taxes. Now, the process of that is either through just doing a Roth conversion or taking those assets and out of an IRA and converting them to a life insurance policy, like a 5-pay IUL is what many people have done. But today, the point is to look more at the pattern. And because the most common question that I hear around Roth conversions is, how much should we convert, right? So many people, the messaging is clear where, your clients understand, okay, taxes are a threat to my retirement and I want to take care of that. But when we go to execute that, they want to, people want to know, okay, how much do I need to convert? But I think the real deeper question is not how much do I convert this year. It's like, what pattern should we convert over, right? Should we do it all at once, which most people would say, gosh, don't want to do that because we have tax drift. Should we spread it out over multiple years? Are there some side effects to taking that approach? And that's exactly what we're going to dive into today, which is not, if a client's got a couple $1,000,000, the question is not how much of that million or 2 million should we convert. The question I want to answer is, once we have identified the amount of assets we want to convert, what should that pattern look like? And what are the factors that come into play when helping make that decision? So to me, I think there's a couple of things that come into play before we even talk about whether to convert and how much. One is, do you and your client believe taxes will be higher in the future than they are now? And I imagine if they're sitting down to meet with you and you've identified yourself as the financial professional in your area that can articulate tax risk and build plans around it, if they met with you because of your radio show or through a seminar or a workshop, or it's just a referral, they probably share your opinion that taxes will be higher in the future than they are now. So that's at the core of it, and that seems obvious. Two, is that a risk you'd like to plan for? Do we need to mitigate it, right? A lot of times people have beliefs about things, but they're like, you know what, not important to me. I'll deal with that later. But as a financial professional, we're going to sit down with our clients. We want to help them understand and believe that taxes will be higher in the future than they are now. And then because of that belief, we want to take action. And that is a risk that we would like to plan for. So if the answer to those two questions is yes, then it comes into, all right, what should this pattern look like? And to me, I think we need to look at three factors. The first is tax drift. And I think everyone understands this one. In fact, this is the one that comes up the most, right? Which is, all right, if we're going to convert assets, we're going to take our existing adjusted gross income and we're going to be adding money to that. And so if we add money to that beyond the tier of our tax bracket, our current tax bracket, then we're going to have some tax drift. And because of the conversion, we're going to be paying a higher rate on some money during the conversion, right? And so I want to consider that. In fact, because of this and because of tax drift, I think this is where a lot of people stop their analysis. And they just, conventional wisdom might say, let's just convert the assets up until our existing tax bracket, and then we'll take another shot at it next year and the next year, and hopefully by the end of, at a certain period of time, we'll have all that money converted and we did it all within our existing tax bracket so we don't have tax drift, right? Raise your hand if you've done that before or thought that way before. I think a lot of people do. But I started thinking about this in more detail. There are some other things that come into play as well that often get ignored. Like, why are we doing this in the first place? Why are we doing the Roth conversion? Well, we're doing the Roth conversion because we believe taxes will be higher in the future than they are now. Well, don't you think that that change could happen during our conversion pattern? Yeah, it could. And so we need to account for that. In fact, the further you spread out the conversion, right? The more years you involve in the conversion pattern, the more years our clients' assets are subject to the very risk we're trying to mitigate against. And so I think we need to, we can't sell ourselves short and ignore that in our analysis. We need to understand that taxes could go up while we're converting, and that is a cost, really, to our clients. And then the third one, I think often gets talked about but rarely analyzed, is IRMA. And so, once our clients hit 65, they're going to start buying Medicare, Medicaid, and so Part B, Part D is going to kick in, and we've got that IRMA adjustment that we need to account for. So I want to include that as well, especially for our clients where the conversion assets are going to drip into where that IRMA calculation is happening. All right, so those are the three factors I think we need to consider, and that's what I'm going to focus on here. Notice something not on this list. Something not on the list, in fact, I want to call it out here on the slide, is the conversion taxes within your current tax bracket. Because to me, it's a moot point. Once a dollar goes into an IRA, that is a dollar that is going to be taxed. Now, either the IRA owner is going to pay that tax, or the beneficiaries of that IRA are going to pay a tax. Deferring taxes is not the same as eliminating taxes. And so when we look at and start to have this micro versus macro discussion, to me, I like to look at these as a self-contained asset where, and that my calculations will assume that, to where when we go through the conversion process, I'm going to include the taxes that we're going to, like the money, the dollars that we're going to use to pay the IRS for the conversion out of that pool of money. And when you start to think of it that way, when you start to think of this is a dollar that's going to be taxed, when we do a Roth conversion, we are not causing a tax event. The tax event was caused when we decided to defer in the first place. What we're trying to do is answer, like, when should we pay that tax, right? And how many years can we convert, right? So that's the variable that to me, the first three are important to consider, but the actual taxes because of the conversion is moot, right? And I actually have an example to tell us that and show us why. Let's just look at an IRA dollar. I've got $100,000 in an IRA, okay? And that IRA is going to grow to $179,000. I assumed a 6% growth rate here, but that's irrelevant. That's going to be common throughout this example. So I had 100,000 grew to 179. So that means in this example, I'm going to start taking income at age 70, right? So according to my calculations, if you want that income to last, I guess technically if you're taking this at age 70 and going to 131 years of income, you could actually, according to our software, you can take $12,000 a year, every year, make it last age 100. But you see, since it's an IRA dollar, the $12,000 is pre-tax. So what you get to keep is the $9,715. So over time, that works out to be about $300,000. In fact, it's just over. It's like $301,000. So that's the IRA. So now let's go, and the reason I'm going through this example is because I want people to understand that an IRA and a Roth are the same calculation. Like the timing of the taxes don't really matter unless we're showing taxes changing. So now let's go with a Roth. And we've got $80,000. Now, because we converted that, so the 100,000 we converted, and now it's down to 80,000. Clearly, I assume 20% tax rate. So the 80 grows to 143. And so then I'm going to say, okay, what kind of distribution could I take, make it last age 100? And the answer to that is 9,715. Now, the IRA was 12,000, but then taxes came in, and we had to pay, what you got to keep was, this same number, right? It's actually that same 300,000. Why? Because I assumed taxes were flat. They were 20% the whole time. I assumed the same growth rate in both the IRA and the Roth. And so if the growth rate and the tax rate are the same for your examples, you end up at taking a different pattern to the exact same result. But see, does anyone believe taxes are going to stay the same? No. That's where we need to modify it. So now the one change I'm going to make is I'm going to assume taxes do change in the future. But you know what? When you do the Roth conversion, I was able to convert these assets, the 100,000 down to 80 at current tax rates. So the 100 goes to 80, it grows to 143, you get to keep the same 97.15, right? Like that's the Roth, it was preserved, same number, even though taxes changed because we paid the taxes before they changed. But if we look at an IRA and the taxes change, my 100,000 grows to 179, but I go to take the income at age 70, I get to take out the same 12,144, but because taxes increased, my take-home pay is less, my total benefit's 277. So now that's where you start to see the difference. And so I go through this mini exercise just so people understand that when we're setting our assumptions here, it's important to show that tax increase. And we're modeling things out, it's important to account for everything here, right? And so it doesn't matter when you pay your taxes if they're paid at the same rate, right? So that's when we need to think about when could taxes change and how is that going to have an impact to my conversion pattern. Are you all with me here? All right? Because here's the thing, as financial professionals, we want to make sure our clients aren't losing money, right? And we do such a good job in using the power of indexing with our FIAs and our IUL if we're doing life insurance, right? So the concept of indexing, we're making sure our clients don't lose money. But if taxes go up on a tax deferred asset and we could have taken action on it today when they were lower, that's a loss. And we're locking in those losses by deferring that decision to the future. All right. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to roll up sleeves a little bit. I'm going to dive into a couple of examples, and I want to account for these three factors that I brought up. One, tax drift. I'm going to account for that, right? I'm going to look at various conversion patterns and what tax drift impact will have on them. But I'm also going to look at modeling taxes changing. So what I mean by that is I'm currently at a 20% tax rate, effective, by the way. And in my example, in the third year, why am I choosing year 3? Well, that's when current law sunsets. And so I'm just going to look at that as an example. And so let's just say the current law sunsets, and that sunsetting impacts my client with a 3% increase to their effective tax rate. All right, so I want to model that and take into consider that that very well could happen. And then the final piece is IRMA. Okay, and so I'm going to look at all three of these, and I'm going to start doing some calculations and see what the various variables have as an impact on conversion pattern. And I'm going to look at 4 different conversion patterns. We could do this exercise all over the place, but let's just assume we do it all at once, which I'm not suggesting anybody do that, but if we could do it all at once, and you certainly impact the final, you wouldn't have any tax change impact or IRMA if we do it all at once and your client's under 65, or actually 63. But then we're also going to start to spread this out a little bit. What if we just did it over 2 years? What if we just did it over 5 years? Or what if we did it over 10 years? And really, to me, I think when I talk to most people that have started doing conversion planning, the goal here is like, okay, what assets can we convert without having any tax drift, without bumping them up to the next tax bracket? In fact, there's software out there to help you calculate that. Like, what is that amount? But so to me, 10 years is probably going to be the furthest I'm going to go on this. So really that 10-year one is the one that's going to represent that, where it's the least amount of tax drift. And I'm just going to look at the total. Instead of just looking at tax drift, I'm going to look at all 3. And I'm going to do so through really 4 different examples. And so imagine we've got $500,000 that we're converting. And we're either going to convert $500,000 all at once, or we're going to do $250,000 a year for 2 years, or we're going to do $100,000 a year for 5 years, or we're going to do $50,000 a year for 10 years. And so those are my different examples. And then I'm going to play with a couple of other variables. I'm going to look at what is the client's current adjusted gross income. Because obviously, depending on where your client's income sits currently, the impact of a conversion asset is going to vary, like on your tax drift, right? So there's going to be some variance there. So I'm going to look at one example where they have 100,000 and a second example I'm going to look at with 200,000. And then I'm going to also play with age. I'm going to have a client that's 60, and I'm also going to look at a client that's 65. And the variance there has to do with really IRMA, right? How many years is IRMA going to impact the conversion? All right, so how am I going to do this? I'm going to really use Stonewood reports for a good portion of this. For the tax drift, it's actually a very little used piece of software. I think you all should definitely talk to your member success coach about learning this report. It's a tax drift report. Basically, what it looks at, it says, okay, what dollars would I have to pay extra just in terms of tax drift by adding in X amount of dollars to the conversion. It does that calculation for you. And that's a report that's available for Stonewood membership. And then the next thing I did is for tax change, right? So that's going to be a situation where taxes are at where they are now, and at some point in the future, we're going to say that taxes rise. And so the way I'm going to account for that is I'm going to run my total tax burden report, and I'm going to run it first with a flat tax, and then I'm going to go in and run it a second time this way, showing the increase in taxes at a certain year, and the report will automatically calculate the difference. Will be on the right-hand column of the two reports, will calculate that variance for you, and it'll show that impact of taxes changing on the conversion. And then the final piece is IRMA. Now this one is not currently in our software, but I just did some simple math here. Basically what I looked at is IRMA is going to have an impact of $1,260 for Medicare Part B and $245 for Medicare Part D. So together that's about $1,500. And that amount is going to be per tier. So IRMA is tiered, much like tax brackets are tiered. So once you reach over into the next tier of income, there's a higher IRMA amount. So it's per tier, also per year, right? So $1,500 every year where IRMA is involved in the calculation here. And then also per person. So if it's a couple, it's actually two. So, that's a number that starts kind of low, but if it starts to kind of come into play more often, you see its true impact to the conversion. By the way, in no situation, or the rare is the situation where I would say any of these three impacts would cause me to not convert assets. I think for most cases, the benefits of Roth conversion are going to far outweigh having to pay some tax drift, or even if taxes change during the conversion, or IRMA. But I just want to calculate the impact so that we understand it, because we can minimize it a little bit by choosing the right pattern. Now, just some further detail on IRMA. I'm sure a lot of you know this already, but the way IRMA works is it comes in, it's an extra premium. We call it a tax. Technically, it's an extra premium you have to pay on top of your Medicare Part B and D. So most people think, well, that doesn't impact me till you're age 65. In the conversion, you won't actually pay that amount until you're 65, but it actually does a 2-year look back. So I think it's important. So if I'm currently 60, and I'm going to look at a 5-year conversion, like age 6, conversion year 6 uses the income from age 63. So if you can do your entire conversion in the first 5 years, you might think you're in the free, but actually there is still a couple of years that are impacted there because of the way that IRMA calculation is made. All right, now let's get into the numbers. And I have 4 different, we'll call them families. I'm a music guy, so maybe you might see a pattern here on the names of the bands that I chose. But let's start with the Smiths, who I listened to quite a bit in my when I was like 10, I think. Anyway, The Smiths, for my example here, is a couple age 60, and that's 200,000 of income. By income, what I mean there is adjusted gross income. So after deductions, they have $200,000 that would be on their tax return. They're going to be taxed on if they weren't to convert. But now, based on these various patterns, we're going to add more income to it. All right, so let's start with what I think most people understand we shouldn't do, which is do everything right away, right? Because that obviously, if we do it all this year, the tax drift column is going to be impacted greatly. And that is true. In this example, we would be looking at $34,000 worth of tax drift. Again, there's a Stonewood report that you can run that gives you this exact number. And so if we do it all now, boom, that's a pretty big hit, $34,000 in addition to the taxes you would pay for the conversion. Because again, I'm not looking at the tax you pay for the conversion, right, within the existing bracket, because that's a moot point. We went through that whole example, right? What's important is the extra that you'd have to pay because of the conversion. Tax drift 34,000. But if you do it all in the first year, you know, taxes change in three years, so what? Right? Not an issue. We converted everything. IRMA calculation, so what? By the time I reach 63, when the number's being used, doesn't matter. It's all been converted. So 34,000. Now let's say if we did it in 2 years. Now if we did it in 2 years, we're gonna have less tax drift, but we will have some. And in this example, you'd have $13,000 worth of tax drift. So you have less because now instead of taking $500,000 and throwing it into the income machine, we're taking $250,000 for 2 years. But good news is we're staying. There is some tax drift, yes. So we did move up in tax bracket, less impact than just 1 year, but there's no impact of taxes changing because we're modeling the taxes change in the 3rd year. Congratulations, you got it done before that happened. And there's no IRMA impact because we did the conversion before the client has that hits that magical age of technically 63, when that income would be used at age 65. Follow me so far? All right, so what would you choose? All now or 2 years? Pretty obvious, right? We'd go 2 years. But I think most people would say, yeah, but we got all that tax drift going on. We really should spread it out for 5 years or 10 years. And that's okay. Again, some of this is, you know, I understand that, like, you know, your client, you can only do so much that your client's comfortable with. And as much as I preach till I'm blue in the face that a dollar in an IRA is going to be taxed, we are not creating taxes. I understand the mental approach that clients have. And when that money goes to the IRS, they're thinking they're paying that bill, even though that was a bill created a long time ago. Anyway, back off the soapbox there. Let's say 5 years. And if any of you are doing conversions into IUL, a lot of people are setting up 5 pays here. But also even for Roth conversions using FIAs, I hear a lot of people spreading it out over 5 years. And in this example, for a 60-year-old couple, we're able to do that. We avoid tax drift. And so you could actually convert the entire $500,000 over 5 years and keep it all within their existing tax bracket. That's great. But there is a cost of waiting. See, what happened here is we assumed that taxes changed in the 3rd year. And so that means in years 3, years 4, and years 5, we're assuming extra tax during the conversion that we wouldn't have had to pay if we knocked it out all at once. Follow me there? So we should account for that, right? And so there's 9,000. I just did simple math, 3,000, because I showed taxes going from 20 to 23%. That's 3 years. So 3 years paying an extra $3,000. That's where the 9,000 came from. Now IRMA, see, if we're 60 and we're doing a conversion here, we actually have 2 years of impact, I believe, on the conversion here for IRMA. But it's also multiple tiers jump. And obviously we're doing this for a couple. And so you're looking at my calculations here over $12,000 in IRMA. So the total, while we had no tax drift, we had tax change impact, and we had the IRMA impact. And so my total bill, and again, this is not the total tax bill, right? This is the extra that we're having to pay because of the conversion, is 21 grand. So you actually, in this example, would have been better off doing that over 2 years instead of 5 years. And so then 10 years, right? So what do we do here? Well, if we didn't have tax drift at 5 years, you would not have it at 10. You would just have more years at a higher tax rate. So the 9,000 goes to 12,000. And then there's that IRMA impact that's longer as well. Now that's just one tier of jumping instead of two because we have less income, but it's happening for more years. And so we need to account for that. Total there, 21,000. And so when you look at this for the Smiths that are age 60 and their current income is 200,000, tell me the right path, right? The number there is like, do it fast, 2 years. Now you might be saying, some of my IUL guys might be saying, well, wait a minute, I can't do a two-pay into life insurance. You can certainly use a premium deposit account and use that if you want to go ahead and use this as life insurance. There's other ways of going about that too. Now, obviously, if you're doing FIAs or just Roth conversions within your managed accounts, you do whatever pattern you want. So hopefully that helps. So for that, but not every couple realizes that they need to do this at age 60. Not every couple has 200,000. Let's change the variables a little bit. So now we're going to go to the Floyds, big Pink Floyd guy. So the Floyds couple, age 65. So now we're 5 years older when we decide to convert these assets, and now $200,000 of income. Now I'm not going to go through line by line each time. I'm just going to click a button. But you're going to see here again, now those numbers jump up, right? There is a lot more cost of conversion here. Like if we do it all now, we're going to have $34,000 of tax drift, but you're also going to have some IRMA impact that year. So that's going to be $10,000. If we go for 2 years, still have that same tax drift, you got some IRMA impact, again, because the client's 65. So you got that IRMA column is there. And then obviously the longer we spread that out, the more the IRMA impact is going to be. And so when you look at your totals there, still the pattern is 2 years. I didn't do this for 3 or 4 years. We're going to continue to vet this a little bit. But the theme so far from these first two sets of examples has been, don't do it all at once, because that is a major tax drift problem. But if you can spread it out over just 2 years, you got a little bit of tax drift to deal with, but you have less of the other problems to where it might make sense. Now, one of the keys here is the assumption on when you think taxes are going to change. I'm assuming that taxes change when current policy sunsets. That doesn't happen if we've got, leadership could point us in a direction where that doesn't happen. Maybe these numbers change a little bit. But see, to me, this is not about predicting. This is about preventing loss and mitigating risk. And so the fact is we could experience significant tax change here in a couple of years. And so I think we should model it that way. That's why in my assumptions, I like to assume that happening. All right, let's go to the next, the Dillons. Now we're going back in age, so we're going to age 60. But now what I did is I reduced to the total adjusted gross income to 100,000. And so now what you're going to see there, you're going to see probably a little less tax drift, but the other two columns are going to be pretty similar. And so in that case, if we take $100,000 of adjusted gross income, and in the first year we model in 500,000 of additional income, you'd have $31,000 worth of tax drift here. In year 2, even less tax drift. In years 5, there is a little bit of tax drift there, but not much. 10 years, you have no tax drift. But again, you have that impact of taxes changing on your longer term conversion patterns. And of course, that IRMA is there on your longer termed or longer pattern. So again, here we are, we're sweet spots 2. And my guess is when we went into this exercise, people were probably thinking 5 or 10 is going to be the answer. But the reality is, if your clients are comfortable with it, getting that conversion complete before taxes change tends to be one of the biggest numbers on it. And if your clients are young enough, like 59 and a half or older, but before the IRMA stuff kicks in, man, if you can convert that before IRMA, you're doing some really good work. The final one are the Stones. This is your couple age 65. We're starting with 100,000. The pattern continues, right? Whereas you don't want to just do it in 1 year because that tax drift is powerful. But doing it in 2 years, you spread that out a little bit. There's still a cost. Never at any point in this that I say that there's not a cost to converting. Obviously, there are the taxes that are owed within your existing bracket. I've said that a few times here. I'm not even considering that because that's a moot point. But there is still additional cost, not just because of tax drift, because of taxes changing during the conversion, because of IRMA. There is a cost here, right? But in all cases, the pattern here is the lowest cost is like once you get beyond 1 year, like 2 years, I'm assuming that if I did year 3 or 4, those would be lower as well. And so what the takeaways here before we wrap this up is conversions can be, and please know that I'm putting this word in quote marks here, can be expensive, meaning there is a cost. But it's all about a cost benefit. Think about something here. Is it still worth it to convert those assets? And in so many cases, the answer is still yes, because those converted assets are no longer taxable. They are no longer subject to any of the 3 columns that we referenced there once we're converted. No longer subject to tax increases, and it's off the IRMA calculation. So while, yes, we might have to pay a little bit more IRMA during the conversion, we can minimize it through choosing our different patterns. We're still going to have to pay some of it in most cases, but we're getting it off the books, and it's gone from the calculation. And so the final takeaway here is the sooner the better for conversion. And I'm other than doing it all at once, right? And so if your clients are young enough, get those conversions complete before IRMA kicks in, which is actually 63, not 65, because of the way they calculate that. And by 63, I mean the income year, right? Not the year you pay it, the IRMA, but the income year that's used to calculate. And then 2 is the tax changes, right? It drives me nuts. How many people believe taxes are going up, and they understand the risk that taxes could change in 3 years, but don't then model those very tax changes into their examples on calculating conversion pattern. All right. And the final part here, I'll just reiterate it. Let's spread it out over 2 years, but not much longer than that. And that's my takeaway. The analysis that I did there was just for do it now, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years. We could play around with this. I said we don't really have software that calculates the whole picture for us. But if you want to schedule a coaching call with us, we can show you how to run the Stonewood reports on tax drift. We can show you how to run the tax burden analysis from in various ways to see how tax changes during the conversion can impact that amount. We can show you how to run those. And if you really want to get in the weeds, you can book some time with me. I'd love doing these cases. We can work through a specific case and look at the IRMA impact and see what kind of pattern your client would look like and what would be best for you. So again, I want to reiterate, this is an honor for me to be able to host these study groups, and so many of you choose to take time out of your day. Hopefully I shed some light on this conversion pattern issue. I know conventional wisdom says let's spread that sucker out as long as we can, as long as we don't have any tax drift. But the reality is it might be okay to assume a little bit of tax drift to get it over with sooner so that we can eliminate some IRMA problems and eliminate and get that conversion complete before we have too many years impacted by higher tax rates. So I appreciate all of your time. Please send me your feedback. Let me know what you think about this one. And if these type of study groups are helpful to you. I learn something every time because I get comments from folks. Hey, did you ever think about this or that? And it's one of my favorite things to do here as being part of Stonewood. So I appreciate your membership, appreciate being a loyal member, and appreciate your time today. Take care.